amazingly experienced a complete sort of remission of all symptoms within 48 hours. This was definitely one of the most profound moments of my life. The clarity that I felt on the second day, and it was like, whoa, it was like the world, it was like a different world. And even inflamed knee joints and things like this, it was all kind of clear, and it was just, unbelievably profound.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I am very excited today to talk to Frank Wright, who has a very inspiring story to share with us when it comes to diet and mental health. Hi, Frank. Thank you so much for accepting my invite. Can you share a little bit about your story and how you came into this carnivore world and what it has done for your mental health?
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for the invite. Really appreciate it. I My background is in I kind of feel I struggled growing up. Um, Recently, I did an ADHD test and I came up quite high on the autism spectrum, which was a surprise. Um, Now, my two brothers, stepbrothers, both have heavily autistic children,
Mm.
and mental health issues have run pretty strong throughout my whole family with my brothers and sisters. They're
Uh-huh.
pretty stable now, but we've all had a pretty rough time.
Mhm.
So I I had a lot of issues growing up regarding sort of drug abuse. I started when I was about 12, um, and it kind of just escalated as I got into my teens. Um, Now, when I got to about 16, I got heavily into cookery. I started to go to restaurants, and I was just fascinated by flavors and cuisine. So I dove into cooking every day for myself, spending hours and hours and hours cooking and learning new recipes and collecting cookery books, all the way through till my 20s. Then I decided I hadn't been to university, and I decided to um, do something with my life, and I skipped off to Thailand to go to teach English. So I taught English as a foreign language for 6 years in Bangkok, and it was kind of an escape from the sort of hedonistic lifestyle I lived growing up. I needed a break. So it started off, I was still drinking quite heavily when I was there. And I had a bit of a wake up after one school holiday where I continued drinking far too heavily and I ended up in hospital. And it was gastroenteritis. Um, so 2 days in hospital, and I came out of there and I thought, enough's enough here. And I started running, and I didn't really stop for about 2 years. So I was running 70 miles a week. It built up to, and that was probably the looking back, that's probably the best time of my life. It kept me sober. Um, I've always been someone that just really can't focus on anything else other than one thing at a time, and I get really, 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 really hyper focused on that one thing. And that thing at the time happened to be running, and I just lived it. I'd be up at 4 in the morning, go on a track session, 20 by 200, and then I'd still might run up to 20K in the afternoon,
Mm.
sort of 6 days a week. Got some pretty impressive times. I won a few half marathons, and I really loved that. So I wanted to um, find a career that I really loved at this stage, and as I mentioned, I picked up cookery at the age of 16, and I'd never really wanted to be a chef. I'd looked at sort of Gordon Ramsay and things and cooking steaks in a hot kitchen. So I couldn't think of anything else to do, so I decided to become a chef. But I thought that possibly pastry might be different because it's the cooler side of the kitchen, desserts and things. So in Bangkok, I went to the cookery school, Le Cordon Bleu, the famous French cookery school, and I got my diploma in patisserie. So I came back to the UK, qualified at the age of 32, and I started my career in pastry. I went into my first kitchen. It was a very small kitchen in my hometown, Brighton, and I learnt the craft there. It was um, a wildly different experience to culinary school in a very fancy um, high-end kitchen with everything you could imagine, with French chefs teaching you everything, to the reality of a local it's still a fine dining restaurant, but it's a small hotel. Worked with a brilliant chef called Andrew Mackenzie, who has three-star Michelin experience. So I learned an amazing amount from him and the other chefs in the kitchen. I moved on to London and worked for 8 years through kitchens such as the Ritz and the Berkeley and um, Pollen Street Social. And I did a small stint at Helen de Rose, which is now three-star Michelin. I ended up going to run a a 4-star hotel for 2 years single-handedly. And then we had COVID, so everything kind of came to a halt there. Um, Through this time, after the my sobriety in running, as you probably well know, kitchens are notorious for their kind of the lifestyle. There's lots of there's many long hours to be worked, and people sometimes can't keep up and end up resorting to substance use and alcoholism. I fell back into that trap
Mhm.
pretty early on, and it got to around about sort of 5, 6 years. I realized something needed to change. I was working 70 hours a week, and I was running myself down at the weekend, probably staying up all weekend, maybe getting 2 hours sleep, then going back to do 70 hours. I was suffering badly. Um, Cycle of destruction, really. So I started to look to nutrition. I obviously got a grounding in that through my athletic period. And I started to just dive in to experts and podcasts, read many books. I think Dr. Mark Hyman was probably my introduction to to understanding food. That led me to Dave Asprey, and I started to do bulletproof fasting. I found that really good. It was gave me that little edge of mental clarity for on the days that I was at work. And I sort of built on that, and then obviously got into the kind of all of the biohacking techniques that he teaches. So I think I've been wearing red light glasses for probably about 6 years. Obviously, it was back then is not so popular, and people probably thought I was a bit crazy. But it seems that a lot more people are taking that up now. So it's been a long journey of discovery through nutrition. I also added cold water therapy, which has been very beneficial for me. I think I managed um, to have an ice bath every morning at 6 a.m. for 2 years, only missing a few days over the past 3 years. So that obviously this journey of nutrition is what has led me to carnivore, being loosely ketogenic for the past 5 years. It's a kind of a natural progression, but it took me a long time to get there. But I actually got completely sober from everything 2 years ago. And I think that year of sobriety was the hardest year of my life. I was sort of doubling down on nutrient density of a mixed diet. I was growing my own microgreens, I was growing sprouts, I was eating at least 30 different plant foods a day, many, greens, powders, all of these things. And I really felt terrible. Whether it was a come down from a life of um, kind of, excessive drug taking, I'm I'm not sure, but I know that the amount of plant foods now, from my experience, clearly were not helping me. So I started to dive more into carnivore information and podcasts and books, and just decided to do it one day and just went overnight. And I really amazingly experienced a complete sort of remission of all symptoms within 48 hours. This was definitely one of the most profound moments of my life. The clarity that I felt. And so here I am, nearly a year later, coming up to a year, and I've remained very strict for the whole year. So
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, so what does your diet look like right now, and what are the symptoms that completely went into remission?
So definitely that, as I say, that last year, the first year of sobriety were severe brain fog, severe anxiety, and what was leading into the most depressive moment of my life. And I actually went to the doctor and
Mhm.
spoke about antidepressants. I really didn't want to, because I'd learned about functional medicine in the past, and I didn't want to go down that route at all. So I was trying everything I could. So yeah, as I say, it was just so profound. The first day was obviously a new thing, but it was the day I woke up on the second day, and it was like, whoa, it was like the world, it was like a different world. And even the sort of, inflamed knee joints and things like this, it was all kind of clear, and it was just, unbelievably profound.
I hope you're enjoying this podcast. Remember that I will send you a free copy of my guide, the 30-Day Carnivore Diet Challenge Guide, when you sign up to my newsletter at drsarahzaldivar.com/newsletter. Also, if you are looking for more one-on-one personalized support, check out my coaching packages at drsarahzaldivar.com/coaching. Now back to the podcast. Yeah. Yeah, I know that feeling. I know when the light flips, the switch comes on, you feel like your brain is back online. So, do you do any plants like coffee, herbs, anything at all right now?
It took me 3 months to give up coffee. I've been a coffee obsessive sort of most of my life. And I got heavily into it in the past 2 years. So I've got all the different brewers you can imagine, and I would be getting extremely rare geishas and things like this that are brewed to absolute. Oh, I mean, I've got a scale with a timer for filter, and I've got a special espresso machine, which is made by a British jet engineer, all sorts. So I'm crazy about coffee, but I decided to give it to quit it after 3 months. I do still sometimes drink coffee. But that's pretty much the only plant that I consume.
You add cream
Um,
to it?
I don't I'm just a black coffee drinker, but I did,
Okay.
as I said, I did do the bulletproof coffee for a couple of years. Um, but I've always been a black coffee drinker.
Mhm.
So what I found was particularly with carnivore, with the nutrient density and satiation from fats and protein, just don't need to be adding
Yeah.
butter to your coffee. I don't really feel the need.
That's true. That's true. I notice also that your reliance on any kind of stimulant, like pre-workouts or caffeine pills or anything like that, just naturally goes down as you start a carnivore diet. So people don't have to worry about stopping everything at once. You can see insane benefits within, like you said, 1 or 2 days, which is amazing. And then you will naturally have more energy. Your body will naturally be more nourished, and you will naturally no longer need to rely on stimulants, and you will notice that it just does not require that discipline that you might otherwise think it would before doing carnivore. Do you do dairy?
I do raw cheeses.
Okay.
But I try to keep as close to zero carb as possible. I mean, Parmigiano is still zero carb. I have little bits, and I have just yeah. I mean, just as I say, I've being being into cooking for what the past 25, 27 years. I've learned a lot. I've got probably around about 300 cookery books. So I've known about the benefits of raw dairy for a very long time. And yeah, so I went to the farmer's market recently and had some raw milk. It's not something I make a habit of, but I just thought, why not? But yeah, for me, it's usually just beef, butter, eggs. I do quite a lot of lamb as well in the UK. Our lamb's great, and we usually know that it's usually almost always grass finished as well, which is always a bonus. So yeah,
Bacon, chicken, turkey, anything else?
I do pork a bit. I did more in the beginning of my journey, and I do occasionally have bacon still, but I just feel I do better on beef and lamb. I'm pretty much ruminants.
In what
Um,
way? Mentally or feeling of satisfaction? In what way you feel that ruminants make you feel better?
I just I feel they're more. I'm more satiated,
Yeah,
definitely. I
same.
think I eat less if I prioritize ruminants.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had the same experience. Even things with eggs, I don't really like to do eggs as much anymore because I feel like the protein, even though technically you're getting a ton of protein and fats from eggs, it's not the same feeling as if you take that same amount of calorie and protein and fat grams and you get them from anything else, even chicken, even turkey, or obviously ground beef and ruminants.
I probably only do 6 to 12 eggs a week. And sometimes I have a week or 2 weeks off completely as well. So I'm pretty similar there. I ate quite a lot in the beginning, and I'm much less now.
Interesting. Okay. Do you take any supplements?
Um, I did I did do a round of subcutaneous NAD plus injections, which was quite a wild experience. I've been following Dr. Abs for a long time, and I went to his talk on NAD plus. I learned that by doing the right thing and not activating the Randall cycle, your NAD plus levels should normalize, but a top up might be beneficial. So I did that for a month. It got to the stage where I it kept me up one night, and I realized that I was completely topped up there. So apart from that, I do Keto Pro exogenous ketones sometimes.
Okay.
Um, but in terms of B vitamins, magnesium, these kind of things, I have not felt the need. I used to have, one stage I was, following Dave Asprey at one stage, I was probably taking 30 supplements a day. And within a week of carnivore, I didn't feel like I needed anything.
I went through that phase too. That's hilarious, where you would open the cabinets in the kitchen and I had every single herbal supplement, vitamin, amino acid that you can think of. And I was just, deep into the functional medicine world, which similar to you, that's kind of also one of my earliest experiences in branching out from what I've been taught in traditional nutrition school, right? And seeing that there's a whole other school of thought out there that does not recommend the 6, 7, 8 ounces of grains as the basis of a healthy diet. So yeah, I definitely went through that route. Then I did keto, and then I realized carnivore just mentally and for binge eating disorder and addiction and all that kind of stuff. That's the best. I have not found anything that's more powerful. Now, I couple it with exercise, and I know you also noticed that just exercise alone is amazing in terms of sobriety, which is why I talk so much about, raising baseline dopamine levels because some people they do carnivore, but they still have the cravings, especially initially. And if you just raise your baseline dopamine levels through things like exercise, you don't have to go through that torture, as you're withdrawing from all the addictive foods. Um, I'm wondering, how's your workouts? Are you working out at all lately? And do you notice any difference if you do?
Yeah, so I adopted the uh Dave Asprey again, smarter, not harder
Mm,
training after a lot of excessive cardio in my 30s. I picked up a sprinting habit about 5 years ago when I started to change my lifestyle. Still working many hours as a chef. So I would do hill sprints in the park, lower impact, 5 to 10 sets with a walk back. So I've pretty much religiously done that for the past 5 years, and I still do it to this day, probably twice a week, roughly.
mhm,
I picked up on my resistance training. I started around the same time. I did do some resistance training in my running days, so I picked up from that in the past 5 years. I have actually started to really focus on hypertrophy and time under tension in the past 6 months, and I've actually gained 5 kilograms,
Wow.
which I hope is muscle mass.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I'm lifting the heaviest I've ever lifted,
Yeah.
by probably about 30%. And yeah, for focus on with a focus on time under tension too.
I totally notice a very massive improvement in energy levels. You would think that if you're not eating carbs that you're going to feel depleted, but sometimes I feel like that's placebo because if you don't have that preconceived notion and you truly believe in the power of a carnivore diet, my energy is the highest. I have way more energy. I recover faster. I don't get sore. I don't get joint aches and pains. And I train every day and I train hard, you know? Mm. So to go back to the supplements, you're not taking any supplements. Do you take organ meats or do you consume organ meats?
I haven't for a long time actually.
Mhm.
But funnily enough, today I bought 3 kilograms of um a, a mince, a high fat mince with organs in it. So I
Mm,
thought I haven't had any for it's probably been 6 months. I
okay.
haven't felt like I've needed it. Obviously, um, studying all the experts and sort of Bart K is particularly clear about the fact that you don't really need them.
Mhm.
But I think obviously, sprinkling here and there isn't going to hurt. So I'm gonna give that a go this week. It's actually 3 kilos, so it's a fair bit to get through there.
Right, that's a lot. Yeah. Okay. How would you describe this shift in your mental health? Like, what does it feel like right now mentally compared to before?
Um, it's it's there were I'm not fighting myself anymore, fighting my thoughts. And the clarity is crystal clear. I mean, it's still, you wake up, some days you don't have a perfect night's sleep, and you might take you a couple of hours to wake up, but there's not, I mean, sometimes my day would just turn into complete chaos from the outset. And I just feel the mental clarity is gold. The way I feel, and it's been consistent through my whole journey. It's not to say that you still have stressful moments in life. It's not a complete magic bullet, but my resilience mentally is um tenfold as to what it was.
Wow. Anxiety,
Mm, with caffeine, you can still get a little bit,
right?
but apart from that, if there's no caffeine involved, then
Hmm.
no,
Wow.
none at all.
Do you get tempted or crave some, especially coming from a chef, background? You have all these recipes in your mind. Does it ever tempt you at this point?
It hasn't the whole time. It's very, very strange. I within 3 days, any sugar cravings disappeared.
3 days.
So I mean, what I would say is that I've had the privilege of working with the best chocolate in the world for the past 10 years in very high end establishments. So I know what the best chocolate in the world tastes like because I would have a little few pieces every single day, all of the different varieties. Um, so I mean, yeah, I've had chocolate probably about 4 times in the past year. And if someone offered me an extremely high-end piece, in fact, I went into Alan Ducasse in London about 3 weeks ago, and they offered me one of their expertly made uh, hazelnut truffles, and I had it, and it was amazing, but I didn't feel like I needed any more, and yeah.
You've probably had also a lot of healing already, and you have so much nutrition coming from meat that you're not as vulnerable to, having a tiny bit and that pushing you into wanting more, right?
Yes, definitely so. Yeah.
Yeah. I find that as well with my clients. Yeah, and that's great to know that once you have enough healing happening in place, you can, yeah, you're not gonna fall back into those old habits and you're not going to go into a crisis. Some people do. Some people, their brains just, a tiny bit of anything outside, like plant or sugar, can push them into a real existential crisis or suicidal, or just depressive episode. So different people have different vulnerabilities to that, but it's good to know that just you don't have those cravings anymore. You have that food freedom, and this is what everybody thinks, like, oh, carnivore diet, I'm going to be constantly craving foods because it's such a restrictive diet, and it's actually the complete opposite. What people don't realize is that the cravings are the result of eating those foods. When you eat a croissant or cookies or cake, the next day, the day after that, maybe even up to the fifth day, you might have really terrible cravings. That's like the peak withdrawal is between day 2 and day 5. So it's so difficult to have to constantly be fighting against those thoughts, not realizing that you've created those thoughts to begin with because you indulged. And that's what people do on the weekends, right? And then they try to get out of it, and then the next weekend comes again, and so they're stuck in this cycle, you know? Yeah. Well, this is amazing. How are you still working with food right now?
Funnily enough, I am. I do. I'm just part-time. I make gelato. So I've moved back from London to my hometown, Brighton,
Mm.
again for a little bit of a more relaxed pace in life.
Hmm.
In fact, the reason I moved back was because my father passed about 2 years ago, which was actually what sparked me uh to go to get completely sober. So he had always wanted me to do so because I always turned up sort of hungover from the night before. I haven't mentioned about his journey. Um, so he was an athletics coach for 20 years. He ran himself nearly 20 miles a day for about sort of 10, 15 years of that time. Just for the fun. It was never a time thing. It was the same pace, but he would just go over the downs and he'd just disappear for 3 or 4 hours every day
Wow.
after work. So uh, connecting that to my running journey, he tried to get me to train when I was younger, and I just didn't take to it. But I took to it myself. It was completely upon myself that I started running in the park to get away from what I had done to myself. And then obviously he found this in fact he says that the 2 years I was running were the best years of his life. But he sent me The Law of Running by Tim Noakes.
Hmm.
Um, and obviously we know, Tim Noakes is almost predominantly carnivore now.
Yeah.
So my dad, obviously, following back then, it was when he was coaching, it was what, in the 80s, 90s. So it was all carb loading based on Tim Noakes's work. And my father continued to eat um uh, like his carb loading basically. And he continued to eat this way when he stopped running. And 2 years after that, a type 2 diabetes diagnosis came.
Wow.
And so looking back now myself, I can see the pattern. He would eat, there was rarely any protein. That he would hardly eat any animal protein unless went to someone else's house. He would eat, I mean, up to, from what I remember, 5 to 10 potatoes a day, and probably about 5 pieces of fruit, maybe more sometimes.
Wow.
And I just don't really remember even any lean animal protein very often, let alone any fat. And he obviously you're completely using that if you're running 20 miles a day. But he stopped. He was still walking a lot. He would go on long walks, but this diagnosis came. And 2 years after that, the he got a Lewy body dementia diagnosis, and we know that it's now termed type 3 diabetes.
Yeah.
They're very much connected. So that was a kind of 6 year battle, and it wasn't very pleasant at all. Um, and as I say, when he passed, it really sort of woke me up. And I think it was about 3 months later that I managed to get completely sober, sort of off my own back. Um, it was around he was an alcoholic until he was 40, actually, and then he started running, and that was when he followed on to start coaching. So it was almost the same for me. By the time I got to 40, I managed to get completely sober. So yeah.
Mm. Is there anybody else in your family or friend group that has seen your journey, your transformation? Have they tried to make any changes, or does everybody think you're crazy?
Um, Definitely. So my best friend, it's hard to say I have a best friend. I've met many friends, but really one very closest to my heart that we connect so well. I actually persuaded him to go carnivore because I was so passionate about it in the beginning. And he was like, you know what? I kind of trust you. Why not give it a go? And he went carnivore for a month. He's now what I would call ketovore. So he brought some plant foods back in, but he notices very, very much that um, when he goes off track and has too many carbs, or he still drinks as well, still enjoys himself, but he now sticks to predominantly hard spirits with soda, probably. And every time he goes off track and goes a bit too wild with the carbs, he notices, and it takes him a couple of days to restabilize. And he can see the therapeutic qualities in it. He says that his focus. He's a music producer, so his focus at work is I can't exactly say exactly, but from what he described, it's a good sort of three or fourfold on how it was before.
Wow.
He's also a teacher, and I think there's a little bit of social anxiety there,
Mm,
and it's all sort of kind of stabilized. So he's really
nice.
found the benefits in a ketogenic lifestyle.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Frank. Is there anything that I did not ask about that you think is important to shed light on, or did we cover most of our bases?
Um, I think that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Frank. It is so inspiring to share these healing stories, especially when it comes to mental health. Like I've really been very depressed and anxious. And so I know exactly what that feels like. And sometimes you can't see outside of that. And life can get really, really small when you're in the middle of it, in the throes of those depressive or anxious episodes. And so this is why, the idea that you can heal your brain with just food. And of course, exercise is great and all that stuff. But I feel that if you are reacting to certain foods, I would start there. It's so easy to get excited and to try it, and then right away you see those benefits because you know what the alternative is, so somebody who hasn't gone through that might struggle to accept the carnivore diet or just eating more ancestrally appropriate diets, because if life is kind of good, maybe not great, but it's kind of good, um, they don't really have enough pain, I think, built up inside of them to be fed up and to just do whatever it takes. So in a way, it's good. It's good sometimes that we struggle a lot, a little bit, because then you end up having a fantastic mental health state. Whereas somebody else, if they didn't struggle as much, they're constantly maybe just kind of going with the flow, not really amazing, but not so terrible. And they might not have enough motivation to feel amazing because it doesn't dip as low, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Frank. Where can people find you and connect with you?
I'm mostly on Instagram at the moment. I recently completed my naturopathic diploma. So my Instagram handle is the Frank Wright underscore.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's mostly where I'm at now. I'm kind of starting YouTube at the moment. So just Frank Wright there. And yeah, that's about it.
Fantastic. I'll link your socials in the description box below so people can find it easily and connect with you. And yeah, I appreciate your time and sharing your inspiring story with us. And hopefully we'll do another chat sometime in the future. So thanks again, Frank. Thank you everybody for sticking with us till the end. If you enjoyed this type of content, let me know by giving this YouTube video a thumbs up, subscribing, and hitting that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.